I'm going to give it 2 more minutes before we get started. It is a few minutes before 8. So if you're hopping on now, just a little bit longer. Grab a drink before we get started. All right, let me move my thing and I'm going to get started because it's 8. All right, hello again. My name is Julia Schwery and I am the educational designer for Thermoweb on the fabric side. I also have a blog. It's called Inflorescence Designs, and there you'll find not only Thermoweb's projects, but additional projects including free patterns and tutorials. First things first, the way I have my whole thing set up, I cannot see comments while I'm over at the workstation where you see the book right now on the screen. So if you ask a question or a comment that you want answered, it may need to wait until I come back over for a question or comment break. Also, if I missed your question during the show, I promise at the very end, once everyone's logged off, I will go back and read each and every comment and question, and I will answer them with your name tagged so that you can see the answer to your question. In addition, I might reference some other projects or techniques. I will also link those at the end of the stream. So if you see a project you really like or a product, I will link those. I do show a couple of projects that I've done in the past using the liquid vinyl. If you want to know what I'm using tonight, you can also go to the blog. There is a blog post that has a list of all of the materials. So tonight's probably won't take too long. I'm not going to let you sit and watch paint or liquid vinyl dry, so I have some stuff prepped for tonight, but I'm going to go over to the workspace and we will get started. All right, so I am over here. So tonight I am demonstrating Thermoweb's liquid vinyl. So it comes in little jars like these. Their liquid vinyl is really nice. It makes your favorite fabrics stain resistant, water resistant, or even waterproof. That depends on how many layers you do, and I'll get into that in a minute. My favorite thing about this, though, is that you're not limited by what you can find commercially vinyl-wise. A lot of times you can find solids and maybe a few prints here and there, but you can literally use any of your favorite prints. You can design things, you can applique things on before you use it. It's great. And the other thing about it is also non-toxic. So I have used it on food items, and I'll show you those here in a minute. So let me just really quick show you. So there are 3 options when using this. Now tonight, we're going to do the first option. The 1 coat will make your product water and stain resistant. 2 coats makes it waterproof and stain resistant, and 3 coats will make it waterproof, stain resistant, and it will have a semi-gloss oilcloth finish. Now tonight, I'm just covering a book. We're just going to make it stain and water resistant. And the book I'm covering, which is a great option, is a cookbook. So you think about using these in the kitchen. your hands get messy, you might set it down on the counter and you didn't realize there was something spilt there. This will help protect your cookbooks. And for me, this is a special cookbook. This was made with recipes for my whole family. So I'm going to actually take this off because we're going to be demonstrating with that. Now, some other things that I've made with liquid vinyl. I have made, let me grab them over here. I've made these. They're little popsicle or those like ice lolly for the kids to hold so they're not holding on to the popsicle. This gives a little bit of protection from that cold. It's really fun. And you know what? These are great scrap busters. And like I said, all of these projects, I will link them at the end tonight so that you can come back and click on them. Or you can just go to the blog and you probably can type it in the description and it will pop up. So I've made these. Another food item I've made are these. These are fold over sandwich or snack bags. I am old enough to know about before the Ziploc or the zipper bags. Every day for lunch, we'd pack our chips and sandwiches in these little fold over. Of course, they were plastic fold over bags. This uses my favorite prints on the outside, but I did use a food grade PUL on the inside for this project. Not necessary, but that's just something I wanted to do. So, like I said, you can pick out any fabric that's your favorite. This one I made for my daughter. She's really into these. And I love rainbows and strawberries. The most recent project that I did, which you'll find within the first couple pages on the blog, are these can cozies. These are nice. I use one almost every day downstairs, and what's nice is it keeps your hand from getting cold. Here's one I have in a can to show you. And you can find this whole pattern on the blog as well. All right. So we're going to get started. All right. So the first thing you need is the book you're going to cover. Like I said, I'm going to do my cookbook, and we're going to need to do some measurements. So here is my measurements. What you need to do to get the fabric size that you need to cut out, you need to measure the width of the book. So starting from this end all the way around. So we're going to do that. And mine comes out to be right under 16. So I'm just going to put 16. I mean, you're going to lose some in the seam allowance. I'd round it to the nearest quarter. And then you want to take the length. So from the top to the bottom. Mine is at 9 3/4. So, gotta do the math here. This becomes 25.5 inches. And this one 11 1/4. And that is the size you want to cut out. 2 pieces of fabric. The fabric for the outside and then your lining. And as you can see, this fabric is directional, so make sure you pay attention to that when cutting your fabric. Now, to make things easier for myself tonight, I already pre-cut the fabric, and I'll tell you why. This is not lined, and I don't know about you, but when I cut out fabric and then I try to layer them together to stitch around the outside, mine are never perfect, and they're always off somehow. So what I did is the best way to do it is layer your fabrics together before you cut. So you can see here, I cut them together so their edges are perfectly lined up. And you want to make sure they are layered right sides facing together. So I'm I'm going to put a few extra pins in here to make sure they stay together. And I want to leave an opening. So I'm going to create a spot right about here where I'm going to use some different pins, where I will leave it open for turning. So, you know, just a couple inches. I'm going to move that in a little bit because the center will be where the bind of the book is. So that's what I'm going to leave open. And I'm going to kind of put a few pins around. Now, I mentioned earlier I'm not going to let you watch paint dry because you do have to let the liquid vinyl dry for a little bit before you can continue your next step. So if this is a project you want to work on, keep that in mind, that it's not a get it all done in one sitting. You have to let it dry. So for fun, I had a little project with my girls, and they made their own book covers, and you'll get to see them tonight because those will be the ones we're pressing and sewing together. All right. So once you have it pinned all around and you know your opening, you're going to go over to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch 1/4 inch all the way around, starting here, and leave your opening. So I'm going to go back over to the sewing machine, and before I get started sewing, I'm going to see if there's any questions. Hello, Sue. All right. Well, I'm going to turn this so you can see my machine. And I actually have something fun for you to watch while I'm sewing. Like I said, my kids got to design theirs, so enjoy watching them make theirs while I do a quick run around the machine. On the pin cushion way. There we go. to get my iron plugged in while I'm thinking about it. Needs to warm up. Warms up really quickly though. All right. So I have sewn all the way around, leaving the gap. Where's the gap? There we go, right here. So before I turn it right side out, I'm going to clip my corners. Oh, sorry, I just hit the phone. All right, so my iron is heating up. I'm actually going to turn it to high for this while we turn it inside out, or right side out, sorry. I lost the hole. Now I am making, this isn't a complete identical one to the one before, but like I said, the cookbook is actually something I made for my sisters and my mother and my sister-in-law. So I'm going to actually give this one to my mom. Her birthday was last week, but so I'm going to press it and I'm going to fold that under so that, press that. And if my mom watches this later, hi Mom. My love of arts and crafts definitely stemmed from probably having the craft store in our basement growing up. Not literally a store, but cabinets full of beads and that plastic canvas for doing yarn work, yarn in general. Just give the rest of this a good press. Then we'll move on to the painting. So, one more time this side. All right, I'm going to turn this down to medium because that is what we'll need when I use it next. And so since we're painting next, you want to make sure you have a surface that you can paint on. I typically use, got these from the $1.25 store. They're just, I've had them forever. And usually I lay these out to paint on. If it's something bigger, like a big poster board, might work really well. And this even itself is a little small, so we're going to turn it. Actually, we're going to use the poster board. Big poster board coming in. All right. So when you get this, it will have a cover on it. You'll peel that off. Make sure to always clean around the edges as well. And you can use a foam brush, or I use a 2-inch soft bristle brush. And Usually with my first go, I kind of glob it on first. That's a little too much. A little bit of glob like that. And I just start painting. And protecting your surface allows you to kind of go off the edges and make sure you cover every inch of it. Another idea with this, and you find it on the blog as well, is another designer. She would make those garden flags for each season, and she would coat them in liquid vinyl. I don't know how many coats she did, but she just did all the sewing up front. She did all the applique, and then the final step was to coat it with the liquid vinyl, and they turned out so cute. You've got like those little garden flags. I'm all for that kind of decoration. Same fixture, just changed out one little thing each season. I have one of those hello or those welcome signs on my porch, and all I can do is change out the O depending on the season. And when you're doing this, you can see your paint lines. So I would suggest you kind of go all in the same direction. And you can start by going like this, but always end it with smoothing out what you've done. Like sometimes you need to do the edges and you smooth it out. And since I'm left-handed, just to make it easier, I'm actually just going to lift this up, flip it around. Otherwise, I'd be painting the opposite direction. And depending on your projects, one of these jars lasts for quite a while. I'm about halfway through this one, but I did all of the can cozies, which to get the pattern right, let me tell you, I made plenty of mock-ups, so used it for plenty of those, and this will be my 4th book cover. So a little goes a long way, and it lasts a while. About finished, and just make sure I got everything. I know you can't see, it's off the screen over here. All right, so you want to wash your brush out and make sure if you got any around the rim that you clean that off, otherwise it does stick, it gets sticky. But like earlier I said, we are not going to watch liquid vinyl dry for 30 minutes because that is how long you need to wait before you can press it. You have to heat it with an iron to kind of set the material. So we're going to put this one aside, and you saw in that little slideshow, my daughter's working on their book covers. So they finished theirs, and they actually did applique to make them a little more personal, and their applique was done with Heatnbond Ultra, the kind in the red package. That way no sewing was required. It was just iron on and done, which is really nice. It's actually really fun to do with your kids if you put your fabric on that, even if scraps, and then let them cut out shapes. You can cut out shapes. I used a die machine and cut out hearts, stars, and circles, and then just let them create their own little masterpiece. And if they're old enough, they can help you iron. It's a great learning opportunity. If they're not, you iron it for them. So I'm going to set this aside and pull out one of theirs. Now they each did one. They'd want everyone to see theirs. So this was my little Melody. She is my littlest. She made hers. And then my older one, Dahlia. I think we will do Dahlia's to start. Melody's will get finished at another time. And theirs is all ready to go, and I think my iron is ready. So let me check it and make sure And it is. But you can't just iron right on it. Let me set that off to the side. You have to use some kind of pressing paper or parchment paper because you don't want any of this to transfer over onto your nice iron. So I am using pressing paper, and it doesn't cover the whole thing, so we'll have to do it in intervals. And the packaging tells you to do about 45 seconds per area. I normally use my phone as a timer, so instead I'm just going to kind of count in my head and maybe talk with you as we do it. So it's at medium. You want it on medium heat. And then you're just going to do this. And if you're doing more layers, you have to do this step in between each layer. You can't paint a layer and then let it dry and then paint again. You have to paint, iron, and then paint again, iron, etc. Now, the more layers you do as well, I have noticed when I've done multiple layers on projects, I feel like it shrunk a little bit. I mean, typically your fabric, you know, if you use starch or any of those things, it'll shrink up just a bit because it's stiffened and it's not loose anymore and you can't play with it. So if you are going to do more than one layer and it's not a project that's sewn, pre-sewn, and you're going to sew it later, I suggest that you do the liquid vinyl first and then you trim to size. That is what I did for the sandwich wraps, and it worked best. Now, it could have just been that 1 or 2 times I did it, but if you're wanting to be cautious, I would test your fabric. It could depend on the type of fabric you're using as well. Test a small piece just to make sure. All right, we'll give it another few seconds since I'm doing this big piece here. And we're gonna turn it over so I can do the other side. My daughters had a great time designing theirs. So another suggestion, if you're going to have a little one, design their book cover. I did not do it with them, and I should have. You should mark with the book where it folds, like on the binding and around the front. I did not do that, so there is actually going to bend on their pretty little pictures. But my mistake is for your knowledge. All right. I'm going to turn the iron off because we don't need it anymore. Move it from my workspace. All right, so that's all you have to do to set the liquid vinyl. So what we're going to do next is we're going to measure it out on the book. Now, my daughters, we made their book covers to fit books that they have a lot of. So my youngest daughter, hers was set to fit. We have so many of these beginner books, Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss, that's what I'm looking for, Dr. Seuss. So hers are meant to fit a bunch of these books. We have a whole shelf full of those. And then my older daughter, hers were meant to fit her Dogmen and Cat Kid books. She has several of these and she reads them over and over and over again. So what you'll need to do to see where you're going to be sewing is you're going to kind of just feel it out on the book. Get it all set up in there. Nice and tight. Oops. Line those edges up. And then see where it fits on the back as well. You can see hers went right over her little hearts, and She said these were little people, and they look like little people in their bodies, and they're holding hands. I love how their creative minds work. And let's turn that over and then tighten that up on the back. So once you've gotten it where you want to, this is where you'll need to pin. So that you know where the fold is. All right. And then you can just, and they do come up pretty close, but if you ever notice with book covers, when you open the book, they slide out. And if you have it if you don't have it long enough, it'll be really close to the edge and it could pop out. So that's why I chose that measurement of the width of the book plus 9.5 inches. And then the length is based on how much with your seam allowance on both sets of stitches. So your first set sewing, and then you're going to sew again. So that's how that was determined. All right, so we're going to go to the sewing machine here in a minute. I want to show you something first. Now, sewing on liquid vinyl can cause some issues with your machine if you are unprepared for it. So the liquid vinyl gives it like that kind of glossy, sticky oilcloth feel, like plastic. And some machines, your presser foot doesn't like it. Now there are two options, and let me show you first what it looks like. So you can kind of see, this is just sewing a straight line. And I believe this was a 3. And you see it gets stuck, and it gets really, really stuck. This line over here, this was one of those popsicle things. I used it as an example. Over here, I used a product that Thermoweb has. It is called Wash Away Stabilizer. What you do for that is you just cut out something that's a little bit bigger than your seam allowance, and you just lay it directly on the seam when you're stitching. You only need it on the top. Your feet on the bottom, they will pull this through just nice, but the top is what gets stuck, your presser foot. Or this line right here, I've been using liquid vinyl for a while now, and I decided I didn't want to do the extra step of the wash away stabilizer, because you sew it on there and then you have to rinse it under water and it'll disintegrate, and then you have to let your product dry. So what I did is you can invest in, they call it a non-stick presser foot. It's kind of like a plastic, just feels like plastic. I don't know if it's any different than any other plastic presser feet that you might have. The bottom does look a little different, but let me tell you, this was a game changer. And look at that beautiful line. So I will be using this, but if you don't have one of these, you can also use the wash away stabilizer, but I suggest using at least one of those two items, or you are going to be angry at yourself for not doing it, because it will stick. I was able to get mine. I looked up my model of sewing machine and I found this on Amazon. A lot cheaper than looking at a Sewing Direct online store. You might already have one in your kit, who knows? But I didn't, and this is what I'm going to use. So we're going to take this over to the machine, and we're just going to stitch, top stitch all the way around, and doing that will close your hole, wherever mine is now. And make sure when you sew over these points, you back stitch, because these are the weak points. This is where it'll be pulled a lot, going on and off your books. So let's go on over to the sewing machine. Of course, I pinned it on the other side, so I'm going to have to watch where my pins are. And this is also a 1/4 inch. Let me just double check that before I sew. Check on my one I just did. It is. It is a 1/4 inch as well. All right, so I still had a little trouble with that foot. To be quite honest, it was one of my first times using it other on this piece. This one went through great. That's okay. All right, so there it is. I'm gonna put her book in it. It should fit just nice and snugly right in there with the seam allowances that we allowed it. And what's nice about, making one that's like a one size fits all, if your kid has books like mine, then they can just take it off and put it on the next one. So there it is. Well, that concludes the live tonight. I will check to see if there's any questions, and I will link up all the projects that I discussed in here at the end. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next month. My next live will be March 19th, I think, if that is. Or no, March 22nd. Should be. I need a clock now. It will be the third week Wednesday in March, whatever that date is. So look for the Facebook posts, and you're going to love it. I already know what it's going to be, and I'm so excited. So looking forward to that. But anyway, have a good night.